She was already leaning toward the cake when I walked in, both hands resting in her lap. 3 tiers of white frosting, blue flowers along the base, a cluster of lit candles throwing orange light up across her face, and no one standing next to her. The whole room was behind her. 40, maybe 50 people, glasses raised, conversation going, and not one of them had moved to stand beside the woman whose birthday it supposedly was. I noticed the wheels first. Carbon black frame, the kind designed to disappear into whatever outfit the person chose. Tonight she'd chosen a dress the color of deep ocean water, silk or something close to it, and the chair sat low against the marble floor like it had always been part of the room's furniture. Like she was meant to be seen from a distance. The Chrysler Building was visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her. City light doing what city light does at dusk, turning everything copper and indifferent. Someone had put together a very expensive party in a very expensive room for a woman who was now sitting alone in front of a birthday cake, watching the candles burn down. She didn't look sad exactly. That's what got me. She looked like she had stopped expecting anything different. My daughter Rosie was pulling at my hand, her other fist wrapped around the ribbon on the gift bag I was holding, or more accurately the gift bag she had chosen, wrapped and decorated with a handwritten tag that said Happy Birthday, Ren in her looping 12-year-old cursive. Dad, Rosie said. I see her, I said. Rosie looked up at me. Then she looked back at the woman by the cake. She said 7 words that rearranged everything. My name is Cade Mercer. I'm 37 years old. I work as a physical therapist at Northbridge Rehabilitation Center on the edge of Midtown Manhattan, which means I spend my days coaxing function back into bodies that have decided, for one reason or another, to go on strike. Torn ACLs, post-surgical shoulders, spinal compression injuries, stroke recovery. The job is part science and part patience, and I am considerably better at the science portion. I moved to New York from Central Virginia 8 years ago when my then-wife, Darcy, got a position at a law firm on Park Avenue, and I followed because that's what you do when you're 29 and still believe love is a structural material rather than just a feeling. Rosie was 4 at the time. Small enough that New York was just a collection of interesting sidewalks. Darcy and I separated 3 years later. Not dramatically, not X, just the quieter kind of Y where 2 people realize they've been considerate roommates for long enough that calling it a marriage starts to feel dishonest. We divided things civilly. I got Rosie Tuesday through Friday. Darcy got her weekends and holidays. We both got the specific brand of loneliness that comes with doing the right thing. I don't talk about this much. I'm not avoiding it, I just don't find it useful to treat the past like a wound that needs airing. What I will say is that after Darcy I became careful. Not careful in the way people mean when they say someone is damaged. Careful in the way a man gets when he's looked honestly at the pattern of his own choices and decided to slow down before making another one. I work. I raise Rosie. I run in Riverside Park on weekday mornings before she wakes up. On the weekends she's with Darcy, I take on extra shifts or I cook things that take a long time and make the apartment smell like something other than just whatever Rosie last microwaved. I don't have a great deal of emotional inventory to spare. Not because I'm broken. Just because I'm paying attention to what I already have. The life I'd built was steady. Unhurried. It fit me the way a good pair of work boots fits. Not beautiful but load-bearing. And then there was a birthday party I almost didn't go to, and a woman with candles burning down in front of her, and a 12-year-old who looked up at me and said exactly the right thing. Before I go any further, I have to ask you something. Where in the world are you listening to this right now? Drop your city, your country, wherever you are, in the comments below. I started this channel quietly. Just me, a late night, and a story that needed somewhere to go. And now these things travel further than I ever expected. So tell me where you are. I genuinely want to know. The party was in a private event space on the 42nd floor of a building in Midtown. The kind of venue that charges for the view as much as the square footage, floor-to-ceiling glass on 2 sides, the city spread out below like someone had scattered a jar of lights across a dark table. Inside it was warm in the way over-curated spaces always are. White orchids in tall vessels. Cream linen on every table. Someone had hired a bartender who wore a vest and took far too long with each drink. The guest list skewed wealthy and well-dressed and mostly middle-aged. People who knew how to hold a champagne flute without being told and who looked at price tags the way I look at light switches, without registering them at all. I was not exactly the target demographic. Rosie and I were there because Rosie's best friend from school, Maya, was the daughter of Ren's cousin, which is the kind of tangled social geography that only makes sense when you're 12. Rosie had been invited to the party through Maya. I was there because Rosie was 12 and could not attend a 40th birthday party alone in Midtown Manhattan. I had met Ren Callaway exactly once before tonight, at a school concert 4 months ago where Rosie and Maya had played in the same string ensemble. Ren had come with her cousin's family and I had been introduced in the hallway during intermission, standing in line for bad coffee from a folding table. I remembered her hands before anything else. She'd been holding a program, one of those cheaply printed school event booklets, and she'd folded the corner down while she listened, then unfolded it, then folded it again the same corner, a small repetitive motion she seemed completely unaware of. Like she was solving something with her fingers while her attention was elsewhere. She was listening to what her cousin was saying, nodding at the right moments, but her eyes kept moving toward the stage, watching the way the lights were being set up, tracking the movement of a stagehand repositioning a music stand. She noticed the room the way I notice bodies in a clinical context. Constantly, automatically, without commentary. When we were introduced she'd said, "Kate. That's a good name," not like a compliment but like a notation. Like she was filing it away. She had a low, even voice. Not soft, level. The kind of voice that doesn't rise at the ends of sentences to ask for approval. One precise physical detail, her left ear sat slightly lower than her right. Not dramatically, barely enough to register. But it gave her face a quality of careful attention, like she was always turning something over. I noticed that. I noted it in the way you note things you don't intend to do anything with. Then the intermission ended and she went back to her seat and I went back to mine and that was the whole of it. Tonight she was in that blue dress, wheels quiet on the marble floor, and she had her chin slightly lifted, not proudly just levelly, in the direction of the birthday cake. The candles were burning. The room was talking. Her right hand rested in her lap with the fingers slightly curled, like she was about to reach for something she'd already decided to let go. No one from her family had come to stand beside her. I watched the room for 30 seconds to make sure I wasn't misreading. I wasn't. Rosie tugged my hand again. "Daddy," Rosie said. "Go sit with her." She said it the way 12-year-olds say the things adults have been avoiding. Flatly. Without drama. Like the solution was so obvious it was slightly embarrassing that I needed to be told. I looked down at her. She was already steering me forward by the wrist, both hands around mine, the gift bag swinging. "She doesn't need." "Dad." Rosie's look. The one that made her seem 45. The thing about raising a kid mostly alone is that they sometimes absorb the specific emotional work you've been doing and hand it back to you clarified. Rosie had watched me navigate the city, manage the apartment, navigate my relationship with Darcy's extended family at school events for 3 years. She'd learned to read a room from watching me read rooms. She'd read this one faster than I had. I said, "Let me carry the bag." She handed it over without argument. The walk across the room was maybe 30 feet and took about 6 seconds of real time and what felt like considerably longer in whatever the internal equivalent of real time is. A few people glanced at me, not with hostility, just the mild curiosity of a crowd noticing motion. I was wearing a gray button-down and dark jeans and the work boots I'd debated changing out of, and I was walking through a room of people who own their shoes the way their shoes own them. Ren noticed me when I was about 10 feet away. Her eyes tracked across, steady, no widening, no particular change in expression, and then she looked back at the cake. I pulled out the chair to her left and sat down. She didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. The candles were burning. One of them had a small curl of wax running down its side. The cake smelled like vanilla and something lemony underneath. Then the room began a ragged, slightly out-of-tempo version of Happy Birthday. Ren lifted her chin just a degree. I watched the corner of her mouth. Not a smile, just the beginning of one deciding whether or not to commit. When the song ended she leaned forward and blew out the candles in one slow, steady breath. Not a dramatic huff. Just quiet, deliberate exhalation, the way you'd put out a candle in a room where you didn't want to disturb anyone sleeping. Every flame went out. She sat back. "You didn't make a wish," I said. She looked at me sideways. "I did. I didn't see you close your eyes." "I don't need to close my eyes." She said it without any heat, like stating a preference for a particular kind of coffee. I set the gift bag on the table between us and she looked at it, then at me, then back at the cake. "Maya's dad?" she said. "Rosie's dad. Maya's friend's dad. Right?" Pause. "You came." "Rosie wrapped it herself," I said. "She'll ask if you noticed the ribbon." Something shifted in Ren's expression. Small, a quarter turn of something like a deadbolt moving before the door opens. She looked at the bag again and I could see her register the handwritten tag, the layered ribbon Rosie had spent 20 minutes on. "Tell her I noticed," she said. And then quieter, "Tell her thank you." Across the room I could see Ren's cousin, a tall woman in red, the kind of person who fills space on purpose, glance in our direction, then look away. I could not tell you what expression was on her face. I could tell you I noticed the look and catalogued it without quite knowing why. Ren reached for the small dessert fork someone had placed beside the cake plate. She held it lightly, the tines pointed down, the handle resting across 2 fingers the way a conductor holds a baton between pieces. Present, patient, not yet committed to beginning. She turned to me. "Do you want some cake, Rosie's dad?" "Cade," I said. "I know," she said. "Do you want some cake, Cade?" We ate cake. That was where it started, if I'm being exact about it. Not a dramatic pronouncement or a moment of clarifying honesty. Just 2 people eating birthday cake at a table while a party moved around them like a river around a rock. Rosie installed herself with Maya at a side table near the windows and did not look over at me more than twice, which I recognized as Rosie giving me space while pretending not to, which is a thing 12-year-olds do when they've decided something is their project. Ren ate her cake with methodical pleasure. Small bites, specific attention to each one. She didn't rush it. She didn't perform enjoying it. She just ate the thing the way you eat something you actually want. She held the fork with the same precise, economical grip she used for everything. Nothing wasted, nothing performative, just a person applying the right amount of effort to the task in front of her. It made watching her eat cake feel somehow like watching something important. "How long have you been in the city?" I asked. 7 years. She set her fork down. "You?" 8. "You don't look like you're from here." "The boots? The way you walked across the room," she said. "Like you were crossing a field." I thought about that. "I grew up in Rockbridge County, Virginia. You know it?" "I know of it." She glanced toward the windows. The city was full dark now, all that cold light suspended above the streets. "I'm from Evanston, Illinois." "Which also doesn't prepare you for this." "What does?" She thought about it honestly, which I appreciated. Most people would have filled the pause with something comfortable. She didn't. She actually considered the question the way you'd consider a structural problem, looking for the honest answer rather than the convenient one. "Nothing," she decided. "You just get used to it or you don't." She'd gotten used to it. I could tell. She sat in a room full of people who subtly hadn't walked over to her, and she wasn't performing okayness. She genuinely seemed unbothered, which is a different thing entirely. Not armored. Just self-contained. There's a distinction that matters. Armored people tighten when they're comfortable. Self-contained people just take up exactly the space they need and no more. I asked what she did. She told me she was a structural engineer. She consulted on renovation projects, mostly older buildings, places where the original bones needed to be trusted and tested before anything new could go on top. She talked about it with the same level voice she'd used in the hallway at Rosie's school concert. No performance of expertise. Just a person describing the thing they did and what they found interesting about it. I told her what I did. She said, PT. Then, post-surgical or neurological? Both mostly. Some spinal. She looked at me steadily. Do you have patients in chairs? Yes. Good ones or average ones? The question was pointed in a way I took a moment to understand. The work or the patients? The therapists, she said. The ones in your practice. I understood then. She was asking something real, layered under the surface of a polite event conversation, and she was asking it without flinching because she did not flinch from things she needed to know. I gave her a real answer. I have one I would send someone I cared about to. The others are competent. She nodded once. Filed that away. We talked for 40 minutes. The conversation moved the way good conversations do when neither person is trying to win anything. Sideways, doubling back, finding unexpected connects. She'd spent a year in Bristol, England. I'd been there once for a conference. We both hated the specific variety of party food where everything is on a skewer. She folded the corner of a cocktail napkin while she talked and unfolded it and folded it again, the same motion I'd noticed at the school concert, and I didn't mention that I'd noticed it 4 months ago. At some point her cousin, the tall woman in red, whose name I gathered was Prue, drifted over. She looked at me with an expression that was perfectly pleasant and contained an entire paragraph beneath the surface. Making friends, Ren? This is Kate, Ren said. Prue offered me her hand and a tight smile. You came with one of the girls? My daughter Rosie, I said. Right. She looked at Ren. We're doing toasts in a few minutes. You'll want to be positioned at the main table. I know where I'll want to be, Ren said. Not sharpened. Just level. It was the same voice she used for everything, but with Prue it landed differently. The same tone, different freight, the way a single note on a piano sounds like warmth in one context and like a closed door in another. Prue's smile stayed constant. Of course. To me, lovely to meet you. And then she moved away, back toward the center of the room. The silence after her had a specific texture. Ren picked up her fork again and cut a last piece from her slice. Family, I said. The architecture's sound, she said. The plumbing's temperamental. I laughed. Actually laughed, not the managed chuckle I use in social situations but the real thing. She looked at me when I did and something in her expression shifted in that same way again, the quarter turn, the deadbolt, and then she looked back at her plate. When Rosie finally reappeared at my elbow, it was because the party was thinning and Rosie had correctly assessed that this was the outer limit of a 12-year-old's reasonable dwell time at an adult function. She said her goodbyes to Maya. Then she came and stood next to me and looked at Ren with the frank, evaluating gaze she used for things she considered important. Did you make a wish? Rosie asked. I did, Ren said. What for? Rosie, I said. But Ren looked at my daughter with that level honesty she gave everyone. Something I wasn't sure I still wanted. Until tonight, I decided I did. Rosie turned this over. That's good, she said in the same voice she'd used 2 hours ago to make me cross the room. Like the conclusion was obvious. Yes, Ren said. I think so. We left shortly after. In the elevator, riding down 42 floors, Rosie leaned against my arm and I stared at the elevator doors and thought about a specific woman and a specific napkin corner being folded and unfolded and the way she'd said the word good across a birthday cake table, with no fanfare, like everything was already decided and we were both just getting there in our own time. The second time I saw her was 3 weeks later. Rosie had a school project that required interviewing a professional in a STEM field. And with the unswerving logic of someone who considers a problem solved once she's found the cleanest route, she announced at dinner on a Tuesday that she wanted to interview Ren. You have her number? I asked. Maya does. Boss. I already texted her. And? Rosie showed me her phone. The exchange was 6 messages long, ending with Ren's number and a note that said, she said anytime Thursday after 4 works, she works from home Thursdays. I stared at the phone. When did you do this? During lunch. She took a bite of her food. I didn't need your help, I was just telling you. I drove her on Thursday. Not because she needed driving, she was capable of navigating the subway to Hell's Kitchen, where Ren apparently had an apartment, but because I was her father and the concept of just dropping her off at a stranger's apartment sat wrong with me. Even if the stranger wasn't a stranger. I told myself I was waiting in the lobby. Ren buzzed me up. The apartment was what I'd expected and entirely what I hadn't. Narrow and high-ceilinged, with bookshelves that ran floor to ceiling on one wall and a large drafting table against the other. Everything had a place. Not the sterile neatness of someone performing orderliness, The lived-in precision of someone who knows exactly where everything is and prefers it that way. The kitchen was small and immaculate. A coffee mug sat on the counter still steaming, a technical manual beside it that she'd been reading before we arrived. The windows faced west and the afternoon light came in at an angle that turned the bare wood floor to something warm and amber, the kind of light you find in a kitchen just before anyone else wakes up. She was at the drafting table when we arrived, pencil in hand, a building cross-section spread in front of her, and she rolled back from the table and came to the door with the same easy efficiency she brought to everything. No fuss. No performance of greeting. "Come in," she said. Rosie sat up at the kitchen table with her notebook. I stood near the window. "You can sit," Ren said without looking up from sorting her papers. "I'm fine standing." She looked at me. "That will get annoying in about 10 minutes. I sat. She answered Rosie's questions with the same precision she used for everything. Exact, non-condescending, genuinely interested in helping Rosie understand rather than just in answering correctly. She drew Rosie a small diagram of load-bearing versus non-load-bearing walls on a scrap of drafting paper, the pencil moving with quick, confident strokes. When Rosie asked what had made her want to be an engineer, she was quiet for a full 3 seconds before she answered. "I wanted to understand why some things hold and some things don't," she said. Rosie wrote it down verbatim. I watched Ren watch Rosie write it, and there was something careful in her expression, like she understood the weight of a sentence she'd said plainly was being made permanent by a kid with a pen. I sat in the window chair and did not look at Ren more than was normal. I failed at this by the second question. She had a way of becoming still when she was thinking. Hands flat on the table, shoulders settled, eyes focused somewhere middle distance. Like she'd switched from active to load-bearing mode herself, taking the weight of a question before answering it. The pencil she'd been holding when we walked in had migrated to behind her left ear. She seemed entirely unaware of it. I was entirely aware of it. These are not the same thing. Rosie asked Ren what the hardest part of her job was. Ren thought about it for longer than she'd thought about anything else. Then she said, "Convincing people to trust what they can't see. The bones of a building. The parts doing the real work underneath." Rosie wrote that down too. I looked at the west window. There was a water tower visible, the old wooden kind, silhouetted against the late afternoon sky. The city making one of its accidental beautiful gestures. When the interview was done and Rosie was packing up her notebook, Ren poured 2 glasses of water without asking and set one in front of me. She did it naturally, without announcement, the way you do things for someone in your space whose presence you've already incorporated into the room's logic. Our fingers didn't touch when I reached for it. But she didn't pull back immediately either, and for approximately 3 seconds both of us had a hand on the glass. Not X. Just the specific, quiet fact of 2 people's hands occupying the same space, and neither one of them moving. The city went on making its noise below the window. I set the glass down. She went back to her drafting table. We left. Rosie said nothing until we got to the subway entrance, and then she said, "She's really smart." "She is," I said. "You like her," Rosie said. "She seems like a good person." "Dad." The look. 45 years old, maximum, possibly more. "She has our number if she needs anything," I said. Rosie made the face of someone who has decided to be patient with a project that is moving at the wrong speed. We went through the turnstile. She put her earbuds in. I stood on the platform and looked at the track and thought about a drafting table and a west-facing window and 3 seconds of neither one of us moving. Bev cornered me on a Monday morning. She came into the small PT equipment room where I was inventory checking resistance bands and positioned herself in the doorway with her coffee and said, "So tell me about her." I kept counting bands. "There's nothing to tell. Cade. We've met 3 times. You stood with her for 2.5 hours on Saturday. I was working the event. You were standing against a wall with a woman for 2.5 hours, Bev said with great precision. That's not working an event. That's choosing someone's company. I didn't say anything. Bev said, "She talked about you, you know? After you stepped away to help with the coat check." I looked up. I was standing near her for a few minutes. "She didn't know I worked with you." Bev turned her coffee mug in her hands. She asked someone nearby if they knew the tall guy in the gray shirt, the PT. Just casual. But she was watching where you'd gone. I went back to the resistance bands. I'm not telling you what to do, Bev said. I'm just telling you what I saw. I know, I said. She seemed. Bev. Like someone worth being uncareful for, she finished. That's all I'm going to say. She pushed off the door for him. That's a lie. I'm going to say things about this for weeks. She left. I finished counting the bands. I counted them twice because the first count I lost track somewhere around 22. Four days later she texted. Not about anything specific. A photo of a building cross-section from a project she was working on with the message, load-bearing question. Who do I ask? I stared at the text. I typed, structural engineer asking a PT about load-bearing walls. She replied, I know what the wall can hold. I need to know what to do when the question is about the floor. I put my phone down. Picked it up again. That's still you, I typed. I know. I'm asking you anyway. I sat with that for longer than I should have. Then I typed, what's the floor situation? She sent 3 paragraphs about a pre-war building in Brooklyn. Technical, specific, with a follow-up question that was genuinely structural and had nothing to do with anything else. I answered it as well as I could and referred her to a colleague who knew more about pre-war construction. She said, thank you. Then Rosie good? She's great, I said. She quoted something you said to her teacher last week. Which thing? Why some things hold and some things don't. A long pause. Then, tell her I'm glad it was useful. I nearly typed something else. I held back. It was the right thing to do. I was becoming less sure it was what I actually wanted. November came in hard. The city changed from gold to steel in about 6 days, the way it does every year as if surprising you. I was running in Riverside Park one Saturday morning, the one weekend in 3 where Rosie was with Darcy, and I came around the bend near the 83rd Street entrance and there she was. Not running. Stopped. Her chair angled toward the river, the bare trees on the Jersey side barely visible through the cold gray morning. She was wearing a dark green coat and her breath was visible in the air and her hands were on the wheels but she wasn't moving. Just looking at the water. I slowed. She heard me before she turned. Cade. Morning. You run here. You come here? I said. Sometimes. She looked back at the river. The light in winter is different here than anywhere else I've found in the city. I turned and looked. She was right. That flat, even November light that doesn't flatter anything and somehow makes everything honest. It was the kind of morning light that removes the option of pretending. Everything is just what it is, clearly lit, without the city's usual golden overlay making things look warmer than they are. How are you? I asked. Fine. I sat down on the bench beside her. The wood was cold through my running gear. We were both facing the water. Bev told me, I said. What you asked at the event. Pause. What did she tell you? That you asked about me. I kept my eyes on the river. After I left. Silence. The kind that has texture, the kind you can feel against your skin. I was going to not mention it, I said. Because it seemed possible I'd misread it and I was trying to be careful. You weren't misreading it, she said. One sentence. Level voice. River in front of us, the city behind us, cold air making everything very precise. Okay, I said. Okay, she said. Neither of us moved. The light was that flat November honesty. A jogger passed without looking at us. A pigeon worked the path 15 feet away with total professional commitment. I'm not good at this, I said. You're doing fine. I'm sitting on a cold bench talking to the Hudson River. You sat down, she said. That was the thing. She looked at me, not sideways this time, direct. You sat down. I understood what she meant. Not just on this bench. At the birthday party. At the table with the candles and the empty chairs. Every single time I had made a choice that was slightly inconvenient for the careful, load-bearing life I had built, I had sat down. I was going to wait in the lobby, I said. I know. The beginning of her smile arrived and this time it committed. Fully. I buzzed you up. I looked at her. She was looking at me. The city went on around us indifferently, which is the only thing the city knows how to do, and I said, I'd like to take you somewhere. Not a party. Not an event. Somewhere ordinary. Okay, she said. I stopped. I'm asking. Is that, I'm asking. She held my gaze. I heard you the first time, Cade. Right? Yes, she said. One word. No performance. River, gray light, cold bench, and yes. I breathed out slowly through my nose. The cold air made it visible, a small cloud of warmth dispersing into the November morning. She looked at the pigeon still working the path. That bird, she said, has more confidence than most people I know. I laughed. The real thing again. The first time I took her somewhere was that same afternoon. Not a plan. Just the two of us still at the park bench talking until the cold made it impractical and then moving because moving was the alternative to sitting there forever. We ended up at a coffee shop on 79th Street. Small, independently owned, the kind of place that smells like ground beans and old wood and heated milk and doesn't try to be anything other than warm. We sat by the window. She wrapped both hands around a ceramic mug. I had mine on the table between my palms. We talked for 2 hours without difficulty. Not about the thing we'd established on the bench, that sat between us quietly, not needing to be discussed, just present. We talked about Rosie, about Virginia, about the specifics of her Bristol year, about a building in the Bronx she'd consulted on that had been structurally compromised by a renovation done badly in the 1980s and now needed careful, patient remediation before anyone could do anything new with it. She talked about that building the way I talked about a patient with a complicated injury, with precision and without despair. You think it can be saved, I said. Most things can be, she said. If someone's willing to do the slow work. She was looking at her mug when she said it. Not at me. But the sentence had two meanings and she had delivered both of them in one level voice, and I sat with the weight of it and said nothing. At some point she put her mug down and looked out the window and I was looking at her profile, the slight asymmetry of her ears, the way she went still when she was thinking, and my chest did something I would not have been able to describe accurately with available language. Not X, just the specific, concentrated awareness of another person's proximity that you've been managing for weeks finally deciding it no longer wants to be managed. Ren, I said. She turned. I want to ask you something. Okay, she said. I looked at her steadily. I had been careful for a long time. Careful and correct and patient and load-bearing. I was going to be something slightly different now. Can I stopped. Started again. Would you? She waited. She was very good at waiting. I want to take you to dinner, I said. A real one. Not an event, not a party, not a PT conference. Just dinner. You just asked me out, she said. I did. On a park bench. Coffee shop, I said. In fairness. The corner of her mouth moved. Okay, she said. Yes. The dinner was 3 days later. Italian, a place in the West Village with exposed brick and tables that were slightly too close together and candles in short glass holders that put warm light directly on the table between us. She wore something the color of red clay, a blouse, simple, with one small silver earring on the lower ear that caught the candlelight. She ordered the pasta. I ordered the pasta. We didn't notice until it arrived. We need to diversify, she said. I know, I said. I panic when I'm sitting across from someone I actually want to impress. She looked at me. That steady, level look. You don't need to impress me. I know that too, I said. Doesn't help in the moment. She smiled. The full one. We were 2 hours into dinner when she reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Not asking. Just doing it, the way she buzzed me up and set water in front of me and called my name on a park bench, with the quiet confidence of someone who had decided on a thing and was not going to make it complicated. Her hand was warm from the wine glass. I turned mine over. We sat like that for a while. The restaurant went on around us. The candle burned between us and threw our shadows slightly sideways. I've been trying, she said, for several weeks to figure out the right time. The right time for what? She looked at me. For this. Her hand on mine. For any of it. I said, there isn't a right time. I know. Pause. I've learned that before. It doesn't make it easier to believe. I thought about what she meant. About an ex-husband and a business partner who still did the math. About a birthday party in an expensive room where no one walked across to stand with her. About a woman who had learned at some point to stop expecting things to arrive. Hey, I said. She looked up. I'm right here, I said. I sat down. The candlelight was between us. The restaurant noise was around us. She looked at me with that level gaze for a long moment, and then she said very quietly, I know you did. The walk back was cold and slow. She moved alongside me and we were close enough that I could have taken her hand easily, and I didn't because the evening had been enough and I didn't want to be greedy with it. We stopped at the corner of her block. She tilted her head up at me. Thank you, she said. For the dinner. Thank you for the company, I said. We stood there. The city went on a block away, indifferent, which I had stopped resenting. The street lamp was above and slightly behind her, and the light it made wasn't warm but it was clear. Can I started. She looked at me steadily. Is it all right if I? Kate, she said. Yes. You can. I leaned down. There was a moment between leaning and arriving, a few inches of cold air and held decision, and then my mouth was against hers, carefully, the way you approach something you've been thinking about for a long time and don't want to handle badly. Soft. Unhurried. Her hand came up and found the front of my jacket and held there. We stayed like that for a moment that was not long enough. I pulled back. She was looking up at me with that steady gaze. Okay, I said. More than okay, she said. The street lamp was still there. The city was still indifferent. I was considerably less interested in being careful than I had been 10 minutes ago. I leaned down again and this time it was different. Less careful, more certain, the difference between someone approaching a thing cautiously and someone who has finally stopped approaching and simply arrived. Her hand moved from my jacket to the back of my neck. Her breath was warm against the cold. I kissed her the way you kiss someone when all the accumulated patience of several weeks has finally been released from where you've been keeping it, with both hands and the full weight of what you actually wanted. She made a small sound that I had no good language for and pressed back with the same force, and I understood, from that single exchange, that she had been carrying the same weight. The same careful restraint. The same weeks of not being greedy. We broke off eventually because it was November and we were standing on a street corner and Ren Callaway, for all her composure, was laughing a little. A quiet, genuine sound that matched her perfectly. Okay, I said again. My voice was different from how it usually sounded. You keep saying that, she said. It's the only word I currently have. Her hand was still at the back of my neck. The street lamp was doing something with the light that I would have found poetic if I were better at that sort of thing. She looked up at me with that level gaze and something behind it that was warm and certain and all hers. Good, she said. The same word she'd used at the birthday party table. Over cake. I understood now that she had been using it consistently to mean the same thing. I took her to a diner the next morning. Not to be unromantic about it, but the ordinary place I had in mind was a Greek diner on Amsterdam Avenue that had been there since 1974 and smelled like coffee that had been brewing since approximately the same year and had booths wide enough that the table wasn't between us, just beside us. The access was good. I'd been there enough to know without thinking about it. I had been there enough to know the step at the entrance was shallow, the bathrooms were in the back with clear passage, and the booth by the window on the left side could be slid into from any angle. I had not consciously noted all of this on previous visits for any particular reason. I had simply noted it. She ordered pancakes. I ordered pancakes. You didn't have to order what I ordered, she said. I actually wanted pancakes. Did you? I have wanted pancakes every Saturday morning for 6 years and I almost never get them because Rosie wants the egg thing. She poured syrup. What's the egg thing? A scramble situation. It changes week to week. There's a phase we went through with the pickled onions. She looked up. Pickled onions and scrambled eggs. She saw a video. Her smile was full now. Not the careful quarter-turn consideration of it but the actual thing. It moved her whole face, including the left ear that sat slightly lower. In the diner light, with coffee between us and pancakes in front of us and the street visible through the window doing its ordinary Saturday morning things, I looked at her and understood that I had been building toward this specific moment across a considerable number of careful months. Not X. Just the honest understanding that this was where I had been going. "She's wonderful," she said. "She thinks you're wonderful," I said. Pause. She set the syrup down. "She picked out the ribbon herself," I said. "For your birthday." "I know." Quietly. "I kept it." Something settled in the room. The diner went on around us, short order sounds, other conversations, the clatter of plates, and none of it mattered. "Why did you keep it?" I asked. She thought about it honestly, the way she thought about everything. Because when she handed me that bag, she looked at me like I was someone worth giving a good present to. Pause. I hadn't felt like that in a while. I sat with that. The diner around us. The coffee going slightly cold. "You are?" I said. She looked at me. "I know that now," she said. "I'm working on knowing it the way I mean it." I nodded. We ate our pancakes. After the diner we walked back through the park. She moved alongside me on the path, her wheels quiet on the cold pavement, and at the bench where I'd sat earlier that morning we stopped without discussing it. The pigeon was gone. The river was the same color as the sky. I sat down on the bench. She stopped beside it. We were at eye level. I said, "Last night." She said, "Yes. I want to do that again." "The dinner or after the dinner?" "Both," I said. "All of it. On a regular basis." She looked at the river. Then back at me. "That's a large thing to say, Kate." "I know. You've been careful for a long time." "I know that too." "Are you sure you're not?" She stopped. "Not what?" "Doing the right thing again." She said it without accusation, just with precision. "You sat down at my birthday because Rosie pointed you in my direction. You came to the apartment because Rosie needed an interview. You came to the event because your workplace hosted it. You've been," she paused. "Every time there was a reason that wasn't just the wanting." She was asking something important. I understood that. She was asking whether the wanting had always been there under the reasons, or whether the reasons had generated the wanting. She was asking because she had learned at some point to need to know. I thought about October. The school hallway. A program being folded. "I noticed you 4 months before the party," I said. "I didn't do anything about it because I didn't have a reason to yet. The reasons came later and they were real reasons, but the wanting was there first." In a school hallway with bad coffee. The river moved. She looked at me for a long time. "Okay," she said. "Okay," I said. We stayed on the bench for another 20 minutes without speaking, which is its own kind of language when you're with the right person. Over the following weeks the ordinary places accumulated. The diner again. A bookshop in the West Village she liked, narrow and overflowing with things organized in a system only she and the owner understood. A Sunday afternoon at the park where I ran, this time not by accident, the sky doing something improbable with winter light. She came to one of Rosie's school concerts. Rosie, who had been informed of this development with a studied casualness from me and had responded with equally studied calm before disappearing into her room and texting what I can only assume was an extremely detailed report to Maya. Ren was in the audience 2 rows back from me. During intermission she rolled up beside me and we stood in line for the bad coffee and she folded the corner of the program and unfolded it and folded it again and I said, without planning to, "You do that when you're processing something." She stopped. Looked at the corner of the program. "How long have you noticed that?" "The first time we stood in this line." She looked at me. 4 months before the birthday party," I said. She was very still. "You noticed me in October." "I noticed you in October," I said. "I didn't do anything about it." "Why not?" I thought about the right answer. "I wasn't sure you'd looked up." She held the program in both hands. Looked at it. Then she looked up, directly, precisely, the same level gaze she used for everything that mattered. "I'd looked up," she said. The intermission buzzer sounded. We went back to our separate seats. Rosie played beautifully. Ren and I did not look at each other during the concert, which was an exercise in a specific kind of endurance that I had become better at and did not particularly enjoy improving at. Afterward, in the school parking lot, Rosie came out with her violin case and her coat half-buttoned and found us standing 3 feet apart saying nothing, and she looked between us with the composure of someone who had been waiting patiently for a project to arrive at its natural conclusion. "Good," she said to no one in particular. Then she took my hand and Ren's in each of hers and walked us toward the car. The moment of yes was that small. That ordinary. No audience that mattered. Just the 3 of us in a school parking lot in November, and Rosie walking ahead like she'd always known the shape of what we were going to be. We started saying goodnight at doors, hers, mine depending on the evening. The goodnights got longer. The distance between us when we said them got smaller. The city went on indifferently and did not care what we did in its side streets, which remained one of its few genuine virtues. One evening in December she fell asleep on my sofa reading. I put a blanket over her knees and turned the lamp down and sat in the chair across from her for a few minutes before going to the kitchen to start on tomorrow's coffee prep and thinking about the word home and what it meant when it was also a person. 6 months later, Ren kept a spare set of keys on the hook by my door. Not announced. Just present one day, hanging next to mine, a small silver ring with a building plan keychain she'd found at an architecture supply store. I noticed them on a Tuesday morning and didn't say anything because some things don't require commentary. They just require you to not be an idiot about them.